Hello everyone, welcome back. It's another episode of Spectator Sports. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca, back at it again with episode number 80. Before we get started with this loaded episode for you guys today, please do me a massive favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages and you can get the audio from this podcast on Spotify. All links are in the description. Thanksgiving is come and gone in the NFL, and we always get to see the Detroit Lions start off the Thanksgiving Day slate, and this time they hosted the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love coming to Detroit. Typically, Detroit is a team that we see every year. They're getting blown out or they're just having a poor year to start, but this Detroit team is different, right? They were 8-2 coming into this game, second seed in the NFC, but I think the moment again was too big for them as they fell flat in front of the entire national audience that they had on Thanksgiving Day. Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers basically ran over the Detroit Lions. Now the final margin was 29-22. That margin is much closer than what the actual score represents. They were down by more than 2-3 scores for much of this game. Green Bay didn't have any turnovers, whereas the Detroit Lions had 3, and one of them was a scoop and score, and additionally Jared Goff had a couple other fumbles along the way as well, which was just crucial to the Detroit Lions getting anything going, and they had to rally all the time basically to try and get back into this game. Jordan Love, I thought, was pretty good. He's been better after a shaky month of October. I think his month of November has brought the Packers faithful back into his camp after that very odd start to the year. Now they're 5-6, still not a great record, but from what I've seen so far, I think Jordan Love has done enough to at least earn another year of evaluation with the Green Bay Packers. Right now, you're 5-6. Yes, there are a lot of quarterbacks coming into this, and maybe you take one. As of right now, I think what you have with Jordan Love is still pretty good, just a work in progress, right? He's not going to be an elite guy just to start off with. So far, we're liking what we see in small sample sizes so far in the season. For Detroit, this is a massive disappointment. You have the national audience in front of you and a really good shot if the Eagles were to drop a game against the Buffalo Bills that you might be the number 1 overall seed in the NFC after week 12. But things didn't go their way, and certainly this is where I think this is just a team that is up and coming. And yes, they'll win their division, they'll get into the playoffs, might even win a playoff game, but are they real Super Bowl contenders? Maybe not just yet. The next slot was Dallas hosting the Washington Commanders, and this was a huge blowout. I mean, 45-10, very one-sided, and this is again Dallas beating up on lesser competition. They have yet to have a win of any team over 500 this season, and of course, you have to play who is on your schedule. But when you have opportunities to impress, like against the 49ers, against the Philadelphia Eagles, they've come up short. Now, Dak has been very good, even against the Eagles and the game since, leading the Dallas Cowboys down to 3 consecutive wins after that loss to Philly earlier this year. And I think what they can do is they can really beat down, they can mow down opponents if they get up to elite. But then when they're stuck in a dogfight, that's when things get a little shaky. Of course, they still have to play the Seattle Seahawks, so I think this is going to be their first true opportunity to showcase what they can do against better competition, but even the Seattle Seahawks aren't that great. They're coming into this game, dropping 2 consecutive games. Geno is a little bit banged up and not playing as well as he was last year, which we'll get into a little bit later in this podcast, but for right now, I think Dallas will definitely trounce the lesser competition, and they're very good at home. But I think the way the playoff race is looking right now, the Eagles might be able to hold on to that division. It remains to be seen, but I believe that they'll win the division, which means that Dallas most likely has to play 3 consecutive road games if they want to get to the Super Bowl this year. The Commanders fired Jack Del Rio after this game. Obviously, it's just been a mess since the season has started. The defense hasn't been that good as advertised. I mean, they have really good defensive line prospects, and now they already traded one away to Chicago at the trade deadline. And they still have Jerron Payne and still have some solid pieces, but I think right now it's just coming to be a reset, right? Jack Del Rio was the first domino in that. Probably would see Ron Rivera not get another shot at this. And I think what would happen is Eric Bieniemy just makes sense. He's already been in the system. He has his own offensive system, and this will be a great opportunity for him to have a head coaching gig with the Washington Commanders. San Francisco just dominates this version of the Seattle Seahawks. Yes, the Seahawks are an upstart. They're new. They had a really good draft. But this team, no matter how many improvements they've done from last year to this year, it's still not enough. The San Francisco 49ers are the class of the NFC West. They are utterly dominating the rest of their opponents after that 3-game skid. They seem to have righted the ship with 3 consecutive wins, and I think right now they're heading into December, one of the hottest teams in the league. They're really dominant. They do it on both sides of the ball. They force turnovers on the back end, and they get after the quarterback now with that new defensive pass rusher in Chase Young acquired from the Washington Commanders. And then you have the offense back and clicking. Brock Purdy is looking better than what he did earlier in the end of October, early November skid. Debo is back. George Kittle is very reliable. But then always you have Christian McCaffrey, who again got a couple touchdowns on the day. So very effective. Now that you have all these pieces at your disposal, I think they're going to set up for a really big matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles next week, which would very well determine home field advantage. They're still 2 games back, but the tiebreaker situation would be crucial for both teams. The Orlando Magic, they have been one of the hottest teams in the NBA recently, on a big win streak recently, including wins against the defending champions Denver Nuggets and the Boston Celtics as well. I think they're showing that they could be playoff contenders. They could be what Sacramento was last year, a team that surprised us and just continued to sustain success. Right now, Paolo Banchero picking up where he left off last year with this Rookie of the Year campaign, but he has some help. I mean, Cole Anthony has been pretty good, but also Wagner as well. I think those 2 guys have really picked up from making those leaps that they were supposed to make. And this is helping Orlando out right now. And I think they're being competitive amongst the elite teams in the Eastern Conference. Now, I do expect some regression to the mean. I mean, this win streak I don't think is sustainable. But their play has to be acknowledged as being a very nice surprise, because I isolated them to be a team that would still be fighting to get into the play-in tournament. But if they're a team that not only just gets out of the play-in tournament, but they're a true team of like the top 4 in the Eastern Conference, that is something that we haven't seen in a long, long time. I think since Dwight Howard left Orlando, yes, they had a couple of teams that made the playoffs, but were they true playoff contenders? Not really. But maybe this reset is different, and Orlando has finally turned the corner to being what they're trying to be, as in a Eastern Conference playoff contender. Dame time, the Greek freak, freaky time, right? For Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, I mean, this is one of the new dynamic duos that we've seen. A blockbuster trade just before training camp started brought Damian Lillard to Milwaukee, and that really changed things in the Eastern Conference. That set a couple of domino effects. Drew Holiday found himself later to the Boston Celtics. And these 2 teams are going to be going head-to-head probably for the Eastern Conference title this year. But so far, in what I've seen, I actually got to see this duo play up close when they came to DC. And that was actually Giannis's best game of the year so far. At now full strength, I mean, we got to see the whole Bucks team. After Chris Middleton now, he can take a step back. He's still not what he used to be, but reliable, and he's a good third option. And then you have Brook Lopez, who will give you 15 and 10, maybe a couple blocks, stretch out the floor, being a stretch 5. And then Dame, who commands a lot of attention from the point guard spot. This team has opened up a lot of lanes, and then Giannis just has so much more room to work with. Not that he didn't have already, but when he gets downhill, it's basically over. And now we're seeing he's just being so much more efficient to what he used to be. I mean, a lot of cutting down of the jump shots, which I would like to see him take, but what's the need to when you're just able to get into the lane at will? Now, Washington has been one of the worst teams in the NBA. I mean, I think right now they're at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and they don't have the bigs to contend with the absolute trees that the Milwaukee Bucks have at this moment. But still, I got to give Giannis credit where credit is due. I mean, averaging what he's at right now. Plus, in that game, he shot 87%. This is a field goal percentage that you're getting to the lane at will for dunks, layups, just very close basket and easy makes. So he's been efficient. Dame is still onboarding himself. I think his field goal percentages and numbers in terms of shooting will go up. But in terms of efficiency, still averaging more than 25 points a game. And that is much better than what we've gotten compared to the co-star alongside Giannis for the last few years. So that is a transition that I think is boding well. And we'll love to see what happens with Freaky Time moving forward. The Jaguars may be the class of the AFC South, but they definitely are going to have some competition coming up in the next few years. We're already seeing CJ Stroud being part of this upstart Houston Texans team, and they went into Jacksonville earlier this year and beat the Jags. But this time, Jags were able to return the favor and reassert dominance in their division, at least for this season. I mean, it was a very tough game on the road, and Houston came out to play per usual. I mean, CJ Stroud has been killing it in his rookie year, but I really like to see Jacksonville want what they've done. This time, a lot more Christian Kirk, and this time Calvin Ridley is kind of getting back into some flow after some inconsistencies for the little part of the October, early November part of this year. But I'm really liking what I see out of Jacksonville. I mean, this win moves them up to 8-3, and that keeps pace because right now we have 4 teams with 3 losses, and Baltimore has played an extra game, so that's a luxury that they have to have the 1 seed right now. But Jacksonville, Miami, Kansas City are all tied at 8-3. They're technically the 2 seed, but right now the way the tiebreakers work out, I think Kansas City would have to lose a game for Jacksonville to ascend above them. But right now, that conference win percentage is really helping them out. So remains to be seen, of course. But I really like what Jacksonville is doing right now. Hopefully what they can do is continue to build. And we'll see what they can do to challenge the Chiefs and the Ravens and even the Dolphins come postseason time. Last week, the Pittsburgh Steelers fired Matt Canada, and this was obviously something that was coming. I myself was calling for this move because we just haven't seen the Pittsburgh offense be as dynamic as we thought they would be coming into this year. I mean, Kenny Pickett is in his sophomore year. Is he going to be anything extraordinary? We don't know just yet, but it's been a little tricky. It hasn't been consistent. And honestly, the offense has been outgained in every game coming into this year. But this time, after the firing, after some new faces, new voices in the head of Kenny Pickett, we've seen this offense relatively to what they used to be. They exploded. I mean, going up above 400 yards is a huge thing for this Pittsburgh offense. And they're going to feed George Pickens, and they're going to do some things differently with the backs. And we saw a big difference with the running backs and the running game overall. I mean, Najee Harris went above career highs for yards per carry this year. Very good numbers from Warren as well, their other back. And they've been flip-flopping. We've seen Warren ascend as RB1 recently. I think we're going to do running back by committee. Very smart approach right there. And of course, there's been some turmoil this week with the Pittsburgh Steelers. In addition to the firing of Matt Canada, there was that issue with Minka Fitzpatrick and Deontay Johnson. And we saw with Deontay, there was a fumble. Really didn't seem involved in the play, and that's just a very bad look. I'm not sure what the exchange was between him and Minka. Obviously, Minka has a lot more clout, a lot more leadership as one of the best defensive players in this league. Maybe that doesn't mean anything in that specific affair, but I mean, just not even hustling to a fumble is a very bad look. But Pittsburgh gets the win this week against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are now without Joe Burrow for the remainder of the year with that wrist injury. So definitely taking advantage of that. They're 7-4, despite, like I said, their previous games. They've been outgained on a consistent basis. So now that their offense is contributing a little bit more, 16 points, not a lot, but the yardage is there. That's a good sign. We'll see what happens. I mean, they still have to play the Ravens a second time, but I think right now, at least with the injuries to the other two divisional rivals, it's looking good for Pittsburgh to get out of this as a wild card team in the AFC. The late afternoon slate was led by the Buffalo Bills traveling to Philadelphia, and I mean, this was probably the best game of the year. I mean, overtime, back and forth, two quarterbacks that are probably up there for the MVP race right now. I mean, yes, Josh Allen has been consistent, but statistically, in a lot of metrics, he's been a top 5 quarterback. I think the issue is with both of these quarterbacks, they have issues with turnovers, at least this season, and Josh Allen has had turnover problems for the better part of his career, but they still make plays at the end of the day. They're dynamic with dual threat capabilities. They can do it with their arm and their legs, and we saw that with these two guys going back and forth, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills, Philadelphia Eagles, and Buffalo was very, very good, at least for 2.5 quarters, I want to say. First half, they were very dominant, especially in that second quarter, and despite their defense being pretty much decimated, the fact that it was a rainy, cold day really helped this defense muck up the game because they kept Jalen Hurts and that Eagles offense in check for much of that first half, only 50 yards heading into the fourth quarter, actually. I was really impressed because Sean McDermott has been under scrutiny because the defense has been decimated, but also just been kind of leaky at points, especially against lesser competition. But this was a good showing so far, but that dam kind of broke through, especially in the second half, because the Eagles stuck with the run. I have my issues with OC Brian Johnson. I mean, the first half was just poor, not ideal. And that one drive that they scored featured a lot of running plays, especially with DeAndre Swift. I'm still not sure why he hasn't been getting a lot of touches. I'm not sure if there's direction that save him for the postseason or direction that he needs to get fresh. He needs to be fresh or he's out of gas. Whatever the case is, he's new to being the bell cow feature back, that is true, but he's been capable of getting at least 15, 16 carries and then maybe like 2-3 receptions a game. He's probably just such an underrated piece, and when he gets going, this opens up everything for the team. When he gets going, the read option is there with Jalen. Despite that knee injury, which is described as a knee contusion, he's been able to run the ball pretty well after the bye week. I mean, a 10-yard scamper against the Kansas City Chiefs and a couple pretty nice runs, something I haven't seen out of Jalen for the better part of this year. Didn't turn around until about the fourth quarter, but this is when we got to see Devontae Smith get going. I mean, he, I think, has been kind of forgotten after all this early season success with A.J. Brown, but now with A.J. getting a lot of double teams, he's been limited. He's been, I wouldn't say shut down, but he's getting a lot more attention. And if you're Jalen, why throw there when you have Devontae Smith? Devontae has been killing it as of late, 99-yard games a couple times this year now, 100 yards. I think he's one of the best receivers in this league, and he just gets kind of put in the shadow because he's next to A.J. Brown on the other side. But Devontae is as close to a number one as you can get with any team's number 2 receiver. I think him and Jalen Waddle are in very similar roles where they're just in the shadow of superstar receivers. But let's turn to Jalen Hurts. I mean, the true star of the second half. It was very bad. 2 turnovers and not a lot going for you. After the third quarter kind of muzzled out, I was thinking it's not looking that good. I mean, down 10 points heading into the fourth quarter, but Jalen kept the team going. I mean, countless drives, 3 consecutive touchdown drives to take the lead. And these are sloppy, wet conditions. And no matter how the Eagles have played, sloppy, good, mostly meh type of football, they get it done, especially in second halves. I mean, we've seen so many second half shutouts by Sean Desai's defense, or the offense picking it up to another gear, either through the run game or passing game, whatever the case may be. They've been getting it done. And now they're 10-1. They're 2 games ahead of their next closest competition in terms of record. And I think that's something really impressive. I mean, to have a 2-game lead in your conference 3/4 of the way of the season, usually things are pretty tight. You're tied, you're a game ahead, but 2-game lead, that's huge. And that could even extend after the next week, or at least worst case scenario, it's a cushion for whatever happens. You never know what happens against other teams. So I think with the Eagles right now, what they're doing is they're winning ugly, but they are tested. They're battle tested. I mean, remember, this season is a marathon, and yes, they're taking body blow after body blow, but they're still standing up. And they have a lot left in the tank, it looks like. I just don't know if it's something that's going to run out. Don't know. But so far, I mean, they're translating this into winning football. They're getting it done. And that's at the end of the day, that's really what matters, right? Jalen says, since when has winning not been the main thing? And that's what he's done consistently. And to go further into what Jalen has done, I mean, 5 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 2 on the ground, including the game-winning QB draw in overtime. I thought this is probably his best game of the year, especially the best half of his year so far. I mean, not good in the first half, 4 total touchdowns in the second half, especially the game-winning one. It seems that when the games really get tight is when Jalen shines. I mean, so many times, this is the 8th consecutive win where Jalen has gone down 10 plus points, but helped the Eagles rally to a win. And with this, I mean, I think that means he's the leader of the MVP. In terms of betting, he was favored heading into the Chiefs game, and now is the betting leader after the Chiefs game, and should be gaining or at least building a sizable lead against maybe Lamar. I think is that's the biggest threat at this point to win the MVP. But, I mean, Jalen, people are going to nitpick. It's the tush-push touchdowns. It's the interceptions, the turnovers. Yeah, I understand that. That's still not good. I'm not happy about his turnovers. It's 10 interceptions, and I'm not sure about the lost fumble count, but it's definitely at least like a total of 13, 14 turnovers on the year. But let's remember, he's a dual threat quarterback. He has 29 total touchdowns entering the 3/4 mark of the year. That's really impressive. That's really good. With 6 weeks left, if he stays healthy, I mean, there's a pretty good chance he's going to be the first quarterback to have like 25 passing touchdowns and 15 rushing touchdowns for like over 40 total touchdowns. That's insane. And I think what he's doing right now, being a galvanizing leader, staying calm, cool, collected, that is just what a leader is, and that's who should be the MVP this year. Now, to go to the Bills side, this is just a huge loss, 6-6. Your chances of making the playoffs are on life support right now. Josh Allen probably had his best game of the year, and that still wasn't enough to get a win on the road. You're going to get your customary Josh Allen interception, and that just came at the worst time possible. I mean, you're still up, but you've given some momentum back to Philly in that 4th quarter, but to give it right back to James Bradbury, I thought was really bad on the Bills' part. And there was just a lot of sloppiness, too. Let's remember that the Bills had 10 first half penalties in this game, and that's this for Sean McDermott team who preaches discipline. Tough guy, especially on the defensive end. That's a disciplinary thing. That's not being smart. That happened on pre-snap penalties, holdings. There's a lot of things that could be cleaned up, and that's just something I'm very surprised with Sean McDermott's team, and that's kind of led them to what they are. I mean, turnovers, a couple missed kicks, right? Tyler Bass missed a field goal, had one blocked as well, and that was a real big difference in this game. I mean, to have those 2 field goals back, the Eagles would be probably on the losing side of this matchup. But instead it goes to overtime. Eagles get it done. And now the Bills are 6-6 with not having tiebreakers, right? I mean, they're already lost to the Denver Broncos, who have a half-game lead already. They still have to play the Kansas City Chiefs, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Miami Dolphins later this year. In this uber competitive AFC conference, I just don't see an avenue unless some other team were to have a complete collapse. They'd be lucky to sniff the 7th seed. But they have the bye week. They can maybe get things right, turn it on. If anyone can do it, it's Josh Allen and the Bills, but I mean, time is ticking, and if they don't get it done, I really think a lot of big changes have to be made, if not already, to the Buffalo Bills. Just like Philly, Denver is actually one of the hottest teams in the NFL. This is their 5th consecutive win against a pretty good defense in the Cleveland Browns. Now, is their offense anything good? No, because with their starting quarterback out of the season with that shoulder fracture, it's up to Dorian Thompson-Robinson to get it done. And let's face it, I mean, what he's been able to do, it's been erratic, and then he got hurt. I think a lot of what he's able to do is decent, but remember that the Denver Broncos defense is vastly improved. After that 70-point outing, I mean, it's been bad. They get roasted on that on a weekly basis. But, I mean, recently on this 5-game win streak, they've allowed only 16 points a game, and they forced 16 turnovers as well. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, to be that forceful, that consistent in getting stops, that's a huge turnaround. And I mean, Vance Joseph was on the brink of getting fired, but this turnaround, we knew that this was their capability, but it's a matter of harnessing that. What Sean Payton was able to do, I mean, Russ didn't have an extraordinary game. I don't think even offensively the Broncos were anything spectacular, but it just comes to situational football. And this is something that the Bills lacked with Sean McDermott, and we saw that head-to-head on Monday Night Football a couple weeks ago. With the Broncos, though, you know that Myles Garrett is there, so you want to avoid him. You don't want to roll out there. You want to stay as far as possible away. You want to chip. You want to be clear that we don't want any part in Mr. Garrett, because that guy can wreck your game. So instead, you run away from him. You call running plays that don't even go to his side of the football. Excellent. That's what Sean Payton is known to do. And I gave him a hard time earlier this season, but what he's done in this turnaround, will it translate to the playoffs? We don't know just yet. But right now, I mean, it's definitely turning the corner. And with the AFC going the way it is, I think that Cleveland just not having this tiebreaker over Denver is a huge thing for them. And Denver might be able to sneak in after all that's happened. If they were to sneak into the playoffs, that would be huge. The LA Chargers had the 22nd overall pick in the NFL draft, and they had an opportunity to select Zay Flowers, but they needed a wide receiver, and they decided to go with Quentin Johnson. And it's turned out that that move has completely backfired, especially on Sunday Night Football. Now, I don't know how much Zay Flowers took into this game being passed on by this very opponent, but it looked like he had something to prove, because he had 2 touchdowns. He had 1 touchdown early this year that was over in their game across the pond against the Tennessee Titans. So this was his first 2 professional touchdowns in the NFL on American soil. And they were just 2 very in-your-face celebrations. I mean, what he's able to do coming out of the backfield, or just being a route runner, he is a game changer. He caught a touchdown in the back of the end zone from Lamar and had the game-clinching touchdown run. And what he's able to do with just getting the ball in space and sprinting ahead, either using spin moves or jukes, or just his pure speed, is something else. I know Mark Andrews was their go-to option, but now he's out for the year with a broken leg, and you need to adapt. And that means more from OBJ. That means more from Nelson Aguilar, more from the running back. They all have to pick up the slack at the end of the day. And we're seeing that it's helping out Lamar too. This is a typical grind-out game that we saw. I mean, much of this was typical Ravens, where they have a dominant defensive performance and their offense is solid, but they get those late game breaks either off a turnover, and they punch it in with their offense to get that extra insurance lead, and they won 20-10 against the LA Chargers. And let's also talk about this defense. As much as we like to talk about this new look offense under Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson, this defense has been arguably similar to the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed days of decades ago, where they're clamping down on opponents. They lead the league in sacks. They're second in the league in points a game, under keeping opponents under 16 points a game, and they force a bunch of turnovers. I mean, 4 turnovers against the Chargers' most dynamic weapons, 2 from Justin Herbert. including a strip sack in the red zone and then a fumble by Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. That's just game changing right there. I mean, those are three guys that always have the football, and you force turnovers off all three of those players for a total of 4. You're going to win that game. And with them doing this, I mean, the Chiefs have clearly shown that they're kind of vulnerable. And I think this defense could certainly either go to Kansas City or host in Baltimore and give Patrick Mahomes fits. I mean, they can get after the quarterback, they can drop back into zone. And I think with their running attack, even being a little compensated, can still eat up a clock and keep Patrick Mahomes off the sideline. I think they definitely have the best shot of upsetting the Chiefs. It's just a matter of getting there. It's still navigating through this gauntlet of the AFC, but with the Chiefs showing chinks in their armor and definitely being their most vulnerable in the Andy Reid Mahomes era, I think this is something to keep an eye out for the future. That's all I got for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you as always for tuning in. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. You can get clips from this episode on TikTok, Instagram. You have a playlist as well. And you get the audio from this podcast on Spotify. Remember, all links are in the description. Thank you so much for Joy for editing this video. Thank you and goodbye.